miss the intel about the next generation of Bulldogs. This is Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger.
Let's go, I'm a Bulldog.
Hello, Dog Nation, and welcome into Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. I mean, the word on the street is that football is back. Fall camp starts tomorrow. The pieces are finally falling into place.
Kaylee, I will say this. The beat there on the Before the Hedges intro, it just hits a little bit better when we're this close to football season. I believe the Dogs will be doing Georgia things, media day, the starting line of preseason camp. So when I hear that, DawgNation Before the Hedges theme music right around football time, it just gets me going.
Last week, Connor Riley and I actually talked about this, how it feels like the world right now needs football more than ever. And I think I found myself in one of those situations this week where I was like, wow, I really need football season back. I have binge watched almost 8 seasons of MasterChef and MasterChef Junior. And
gosh.
I don't even cook like that.
Oh, wow.
So knowing that we have fall camp back tomorrow and I can get my priorities back in line, I need football season more than ever.
Does that mean you've watched all the Netflix quarterback shows and you've watched every possible show?
I have ran through everything.
There's nothing left. Cooking shows. You're going to be an expert. You're going to be an expert chef every summer, right? Basically.
I don't know about myself making it, but if other people make it, I can definitely analyze and evaluate it. But again, it just goes to show that I need football more than anybody else right now. And real quick, before we get into the show, new piece of hardware here. Tell me about it.
Sure. Great DawgNation cruisers, great members of our DawgNation family community. This is the Howards, Darren and Lisa. They've been on, I believe, 4 DawgNation cruises, and these guys sent this to me over the summer, just beyond humbled and proud that we have a community that has people with this amount of talent that want to do this. And it's got the Sentell's Intel logo on it. It's got DawgNation's logo on it. And it's really a functioning helmet. Looks like the other side is the Georgia Power G. So we have a pretty good centerpiece now for Before the Hedges. And they've done something like this for Brandon as well. And we all thought that was cool and great. And the Howards just break out a little bit more, and they're very generous and very awesome for him to share his talent like that.
Well, I feel like it's appropriate because this show is definitely built upon Sentell's Intel and the people that continue to watch week in and week out. So we really appreciate that. And with that, we'll go ahead and get into today's episode of Before the Hedges. Somehow, some way, the Dogs find themselves in the number 1 spot for the 2026 recruiting ranking. So we're going to talk about how did they manage to get there. And we've got a double commitment watch this weekend between the interior offensive lineman Breck Kolojay and the defensive lineman Anthony Lonon. So we'll preview both of those decisions. And with fall camp starting tomorrow, it's time to revisit some of those guys from the 2025 class that have the potential to make a really big impact on this season. But let's start with this. Last Wednesday when we did this show, we had a really in-depth conversation about how does Georgia move up to the number 1 spot in the recruiting rankings. Yeah. Well, lo and behold, they didn't actually have to do anything.
We manifested it, right?
And
basically.
It's not like they added anyone, and USC didn't lose anyone. So how did this happen?
Well, first of all, Kaylee, hopefully, one thing I like about this show and the co-host scheme is we can get a little silly sometimes. So there's those memes on social media where people go how in the world did that happen? And I'm sitting here going, so first of all, get out your slide rulers, DawgNation, because there's a formula. 24/7 Sports Composite has a formula. They changed their formula where basically there used to be 4 components. It was the Rivals ranking, the On3 ranking, the 24/7 Pure ranking, and the On3 ranking. And since Rivals and On3 merged and became the entity that they are now, they've changed the formula where 33% is ESPN, 33% is 24/7, and 33% is the new Rivals ranking, because there's really not a On3 ranking anymore since Rivals is their home for high school recruiting. But somehow they re-racked it. They got their slide rulers out. They got their protractors out. They carried the one, fingers and toes, abacus time. And somehow they churned out that the Dogs had the nation's number 1 class, which is, I kind of wonder. I think the biggest thing, Kaylee, is considering what Georgia lost and didn't get. If we were sitting here and we were by the campfire, right? We're roasting marshmallows in May, and we're like, Kaylee, I'm going to tell you something. I'm from the future, and Georgia's going to have the number 1 class on August the 1st, but it won't have Mark Bowman. It won't have Jackson Cantwell. It won't have Derek Cooper. It won't have Tyler Atkinson. It'll only have 2 5-stars. Somehow this twists and turns and rocky road that Georgia's going to wind up number 1. You'd probably say something like, "Keep drinking, Jeff," or like, "What do you got in that canteen, my man?"
Well, you bring up a good point because Georgia has had a lot of big misses this year, especially on the 5-star front, but somehow they still find a way to get into that number 1 spot. Would you say this is the quietest number 1 class that Georgia's ever had?
Pretty much, because the things about the class you wouldn't really know unless you really look at it. Number 1, there's only 2 5-stars. Number 2, the 3 highest rated, depending on the service you look at. But then the next thing is, I believe the 3 highest rated players in the class are offensive players, which you don't really imagine when you see there. You got Jared Curtis, you got Caden Prothro. But and then you start going on, and I think probably one of the biggest reasons why, Kaylee, is there's 30 guys already committed, but you got to remember that includes being weighted down in the opposite direction with a punter, a kicker, and a junior college prospect in Seven Cloud. So, one of the most fascinating things I'm sure people out there want to know is like who's next, and will it stick? And Kaylee, I don't think it will stick, but simply because of for instance, Alabama only has 21 commitments, whereas USC, who's number 2, has, I believe, 30 commitments or 31 commitments. But then you keep going down the line, and LSU is number 8, and they only have 16 commitments. Well, that just to me doesn't say that LSU is going to find 12 more commitments because they're not out there. Like you and I have discussed on the show already. I believe it was last week that I believe there's only 8 guys left in the top 100 left that are uncommitted. There's only 13 left in the top 200 that are uncommitted. So there's not like you're going to get a bunch of prizes that will scoot it up. But, you also have the consideration there as you wonder, is Georgia going to hold on to a Chase Calicut with his kind of severe legal troubles he's going through right now, and then also Seven Cloud as well. So I believe it's very wait and see. But the fact that Georgia got to number 1 in the country, which is always a Bulldog point of pride, is in some ways one magical mystery road trip tour there of its own.
Yeah, the sustainability of staying in that spot is also something that concerns me just because of how close it is within the top 5. It felt like Georgia was behind USC forever. They make that jump, but they're only ahead by 1 point. Georgia having 304, USC having 303, and then behind them you've got Texas A&M, Alabama, and Notre Dame who are in that 290 range. So even just looking at this alone and knowing that Georgia is one of the schools that has more commits, even though people are starting to wrap up their classes, something tells me that they don't stay there, but hey, it's fun while it lasts.
Yeah, Kaylee, there's an interesting thing to look at here. Say, you see USC is right there second on the list, and USC and Georgia are poised to get one of those 2 schools will likely get a commitment on Friday, which we'll jump into a little bit later in our show, but it could be very short-lived if the Trojans grab that prospect. And, the other thing to think about there with all these kind of moving pieces and everything else is August 1st was big, will be big not only because, hey, that's when everything gets going, but also it's going to be big because I believe lots of these deals with collectives and schools and revenue shares, there's going to be some finality with that on August the 1st. So really, if you want to say, hey, Georgia's going to flip these 3 guys and hold on to the number 1 spot, I don't know if you can count on that.
So last thing on this, because you can clearly see that Georgia made the jump to number 1. Alabama also makes a big leap because Notre Dame was in that number 4 spot for a while. Were there any other big jumps or falls within the rankings that are important to know?
Well, I think one's coming this weekend. You see a school that's not inside the top 5, but I believe Oregon right now is number 11, and they're poised to get maybe a 5-star edge, and they're going to get another 4-star prospect, maybe 2 5-stars over the weekend. When there's not a lot of those left, so that you could see them go all the way up to 6 or so and everything else like that. But, Bama's a school. You wonder what else they have out there as well. But I think people get into recruiting rankings, but I think the main thing, if we want you guys to take away anything from all this, is the class meeting the needs at an elite level? And I think as best it can, Georgia is really doing that so far.
All right, so still to come on Before the Hedges, we've got a double commitment weekend preview, and then Jeff and I are going to go through our top 5 freshmen to watch headed into fall camp tomorrow. But first, we want to remind you that here on Before the Hedges, we are brought to you by Kroger, and I know a lot of students are starting back school this Friday, which is August 1st, if not just a little bit later. And Kroger has all the tools you need for everything back to school, even if you maybe procrastinated and waited till the last minute, whether it's healthy snacks and lunch items for lunch boxes or school supplies and easy dinners as you get back into the routine of things. Kroger has you covered. You can either visit Kroger.com, go to your local Kroger, or to have all of those things delivered to your house just to make it a little bit easier, you can sign up at Kroger.com/boost. That's Kroger.com/boost. So even though we have been in this period where there's been a lot of commitments and things have kind of slowed down for you and I, all of a sudden we bounce back 2 commitments this weekend. We'll start with the first one, which is going to be Breck Kolojay, the 4-star interior offensive lineman out of IMG, who will commit this Friday, August 1st. It's down to Georgia, USC, Miami, Oklahoma, and Colorado. But Jeff, the crystal ball picks have him going to USC. Could this race be closer than it seems, or is it potentially a lock for the Trojans?
I don't know if it's a lock. I think right now, Kaylee, my information says, obviously we try to figure out where the Dogs kind of land here, but like my information says the Dogs are probably vying for second place with Miami. Oh. I think it's very interesting when you hey Kaylee, I'm going to tell you what we experienced back in May in Nixa, Missouri could still probably happen here with this one. If Miami
still might be too soon.
Miami decides, hey, let's open up the billfold. Let's open up the life wallet. If you guys get that joke, then you guys follow recruiting very well. But I would say, Georgia, like it's really interesting because I saw Breck Kolojay last year at a game. I believe it was the Tennessee game when Georgia was rocking, and it was about as, was it the best performance Sanford Stadium ever had for a home game? Maybe not, but it was probably in the top 5 or 95th percentile. And I saw Kolojay, the way he was reacting, I thought that guy's probably going to be a dog. And then you heard him coming out of his official visit when the quotes came out where it was like he freaking loves Georgia. But it's kind of been a back and forth. The kid's from Colorado, so he's kind of a West Coast kid, a West Coast family. That's why Colorado is kind of in his final group. But you've really consistently heard Southern California, USC, Miami, and Georgia. And at different points, I'd say it's probably been Miami, and then it's also been Southern Cal. But you haven't heard like a lot of Georgia buzz, even though that Georgia has really prioritized him. I think he was the number 1 IOL interior offensive line target for Stacey Searles in this class. So that would obviously be a kind of a miss there. But part of this is this is a different recruiting world we're living in, Kaylee. Like, USC's offensive line coach was basically the tight ends coach a year ago, and he got promoted after the 2024 season to offensive line coach. So are you really talking about a guru offensive line coach at SC? I don't think so, but we would obviously take a look at that, and I would imagine that USC is going to have a very competitive bid for Kolojay, and maybe they walk away with, it's so funny that maybe that's a good story for down the road, but of all the targets that were at Georgia last year for the Tennessee game, it's kind of funny how they've all splintered off in different directions. Like Derek Cooper, he goes to Texas. Tyler Atkinson goes to Texas. USC gets Kolojay, potentially gets Kolojay and Mark Bowman. So it's kind of funny how that class of 2026 sideline photo will turn out.
Well, you mentioned that he was the top target on Stacey Searles' list. He's also our Before the Hedges number 1 top target, which you'll see later in this show. I thought back to something that you said last week when we were going through the class breakdown, and I asked you, out of all of the offensive positions, like where's one that Georgia could use help still? And you said it would be really beneficial for them to get another elite interior offensive lineman. If they don't get Kolojay, who do they turn to next? Yeah,
I think they're going to look in state. There's a couple players, and I think that would be under the flip watch, Kaylee, of guys that are committed to other schools. I mean, I know our buddy Brandon would love to see Georgia flip a guy from in-state that's currently committed to the Florida Gators. But it's one of those things. Listen, we were rolling that film up there. Kolojay is very good. He's very nasty. I think IMG Academy has probably one of the best offensive lines they've ever had. Like, everybody off that line is very, very good. And I think Kolojay would have been the type of guy that could have played right away, could have had like a Tate Ratledge type impact at Georgia. And I think that will be a miss. Again, when you look at the top targets for Georgia, the number one guys at every position, I think not getting Kolojay would kind of be another new normal about, hey, Georgia usually gets one of their top guys at all these positions, and it's just getting harder and harder to do so.
So we'll head back to the Peach State for our second commitment preview. For the 4-star defensive lineman, Anthony Lonon Jr., who we'll hear from here in just a second. He's out of Clark Central, which is in Athens, right in Georgia's backyard, and he'll make his decision this Saturday at 1 o'clock. It's down to Georgia, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and NC State, but it looks like it's really coming down to Georgia and Georgia Tech. Like, how close is this, and how has Georgia Tech managed to make itself a real contender in this?
Yeah, his father and AJ both bring up the term phenomenal when they talk about Jess Simpson, former coach at Buford. He's been at South Carolina, I believe. He's been with the Ravens. He's at Tech now. He's kind of been all over. And they actually offered Anthony Lonon, who is a Georgia legacy, first. They beat Georgia by about a couple of months, and they've been recruiting him consistently, recruiting him very hard and very well. So Georgia's offer, I believe, didn't come until the first week of June, even though it's a legacy. But a lot of that has to do with London's body changing. Lonon was 6'2", 235-ish last year. Now he's about 265. He's put on a lot of weight to kind of carry that, to be able to be an SEC prospect. But he's also, at least in short space, Kaylee, he's maintained that twitch, and he's maintained that ability to really cover ground in a short time. He was his region's defensive player of the year. Now his father, who we're going to hear from, Anthony Lonon Sr., came to Georgia out of Screven County in the 90s. And he was at, everybody, there wasn't really a lot of rankings for these guys. It was more like, are you an All-American? Are you a parade All-American? Are you an AJC Super 11? But somebody had him rated, because Anthony was telling me this story. He was the number 1 tight end in the country and the number 2 defensive end in the country. He plays for Georgia. He plays for Jim Donnan. And, again, out of Screven County. And, this is a guy that was at Georgia. So, one of these things, and obviously there's a decision to be made and everything else like that, Kaylee, but here's something I find interesting. I believe it was the 1995 recruiting class. That was Jim Donnan. Coach Donnan signed the Lucky brothers. One of those is the father of Carter Lucky, who's already in this class. And should Georgia close the deal with Anthony Lonon, you would have 2 fathers that were in the same recruiting class at Georgia. And then definitely a generation later, you have 2 sons that are in the same recruiting class at Georgia. I don't know about you, Kaylee. I like that type of stuff. And that's exactly the way it's supposed to work, being the next generation. But that's very, very hard to do for dad and son to both be good enough to play for the Dogs.
I didn't even piece that together. That would make for such a cool graphic, or even a short story that the Georgia social media could throw together. I want to give you your flowers. You have been on the road doing the hard work, and you had the chance to recently catch up with Anthony Lonon Jr. So here's the latest on him.
If you were 8 years old and I asked you what was your dream school, or 15 years old, what was your dream school? What was your dream school?
When I was a kid, definitely I grew up in Athens, Georgia. So I'm watching UGA. That's the only thing I know, UGA football, growing up in Athens. So I was like, dang, I want to play here. And you asked me at 15 years old, now I'm in high school. I'm starting as a high schooler. So honestly, I'd be grateful for any opportunity. Like Georgia Tech, I also started getting to know them once they started rising. They've had a great culture upcoming these past couple years. So it's really just changed throughout the years.
Why does Georgia want you? What do they see in your game? Is it that twitch you were talking about earlier?
Yes, sir. That twitch is definitely what Coach Scott has told me about. He's like the fact, once again, that I can be a good end, non-tech to 3-tech, because I can hold the ball and then put me on the guard on 3rd down and be able to beat him and get a sack.
What do you love about football?
Yes, sir. With football, I love being able to just make a big hit, slipping through the offensive line, and I'm right there smothering the running back with the quarterback, just being in the game, the energy. You can't really get that a lot of other places.
When you watch your film, there are very few loafs. Have you ever loafed? Have you ever caught yourself loafing, and what does that feel like, man?
Man, it's just like we get tired, you know, and I push through it. But I have caught myself loafing. I'm not the perfect player, of course. And it's just like every time I watch, I'm like, what are you doing, man? You could have chased that ball down. You could have got another player. You could have stopped maybe a potential first down, touchdown, or whatever. So it's always just looking back and saying, okay, this is what I could do better when it comes to loafing.
Your offers go down to 0, you get reset, and you have to show all these coaches one play to get the offers back. Which one would it be?
I would say Loganville game. That was my most best game stat-wise. I had 13 tackles. I would say there was a play where I had a stunt call, so I went in, dipped. The running back is running outside, so I'm inside the guard, and I came back out, and I made the tackle. I think that's a play coaches really like to see, to be able to see a player he can get skinny and then redirect and go and get the ball. So I think that's one of my favorite plays I've ever done.
AJ, have you made the decision yet? Is it in your back pocket locked away? Do you know yet, or are you still doing some thinking?
Yes, sir. I pretty much know, but it's not official yet. I'll know for sure 100% August 2nd.
If you do choose Georgia on August the 2nd, what would be put your finger on the biggest reason why?
I think the biggest reason I would choose UGA would be because of the fact that they believe that because I'm a twitchy, good-sized defensive lineman, I could play anything from 9 to 3, and I could grow into a position.
Same question for the Yellow Jackets.
Yes, sir. Definitely, if I chose the Yellow Jackets, it's because Coach Simpson, he knows how to develop a 3-tech. He was with Grady Jarrett on the Falcons, and he's developed players on the Baltimore Ravens right now. So I feel like that would be the main reason, knowing that, okay, I have a clear path going there. Yes, sir.
Who do you think you play like?
I do see Grady Jarrett a lot because of the way he's twitchy, a 3-tech, and he can play on that end. Honestly, I don't have as much film on the end as I've had in previous years, or I know that I should have. But honestly, I feel like this upcoming year it could change. It could still be him. So we'll see.
Goals for your senior year, what are those?
Definitely, as a team, we got to make it past the first round. We didn't do that last year. We went against Houston County, a good team, of course, and we lost. And just a personal goal for me is just ball out. You know, don't worry about, you know, all the outside factors. Don't let people get in my head. Stay humble. Those are my main goals. Just ball out.
Your teammates have a nickname for you. What do they call you?
They call me Low.
Low?
My last name is London, so it's just L-Low. It's also a name my dad goes by. That's what they call me.
There you go, Low, man. Great interview rep. Hey, man, lots of energy. He fires off the ball with all the questions, too. Anthony, man, thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, sir, of course.
For those of you listening on podcast, you weren't able to see this, but in that conversation, there's a picture of him. I'm assuming it's from a Georgia OV, and he's in the jersey, and he's completely upside down, where he's basically putting all of his weight on his head.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Kaylee, first of all, that was no DawgNation CGI trickeration there. I've never seen that before. So obviously I asked Anthony about it, and the lowdown on that on that picture right there is he said he wanted to make the photo shoots clever. And he wanted to make them unique, so he's always wanted to do that. Now, that's pretty good in its own right, Kaylee, but this is a defensive lineman able to stand on his head and hold that for a picture. Mm-hmm. Now, I know cameras are pretty fast these days, but that's normally not something you see defensive linemen doing, and he pulled it off very well.
So seeing him in that video, looking at his profile, I mean, he's only, 6'1.5", 265 pounds, which is a little bit undersized for a typical Georgia defensive lineman. How do you think that he could fit in with the Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann defense? Yeah,
so one of the things I had to kind of educate myself about is, his film's great, Kaylee, but there's a lot of plays where he's just knifing into the backfield, shooting gaps, getting past a kind of a outclassed blocker, and you don't see Georgia's defense do that. They want to kind of play more of a gap, hold their gap, and not really knife into those backfield plays unless it was the great 88 Jalen Carter. But one of the things I asked him about it, and it's very unique, Kaylee, because perhaps about as unique as a defensive lineman standing on his head for a photo shoot, not really standing on his head. It's not a handstand. It's strictly through his neck and his helmet. But he was like, Trey Scott said he is looking for a different type of defensive lineman. He name dropped Aaron Donald as that twitchy, undersized guy that's, able to play, up and down the scheme. And Kaylee, the kind of the most remarkable thing is he told me Georgia sees him to play anywhere from a 3 to a 9. Now, the 3 technique, considering he's only like 6'1", 6'2", and 260, probably only going to happen on third down because he's not going to hold up in the SEC at all at 270 as a 3-tech because he'll just get manned out and pushed out of his gap. But maybe on passing situations you can do that because obviously he's probably going to put on some more weight too. But the one things you get with, watching Lonon on film is he doesn't loaf. He's always got that constant motor to the point where the Georgia great David Pollock would look at this film and he'd go, yeah, that's the way you should do it. But he's always going to be low off the ball. He's always going to have a great motor, and he's going to have a very impressive first step. So that short space quickness. So those are things you can work with. I think the body's got to change. And Kaylee, I'm just going to be tremendously honest here. You can't go get the Elijah Griffins every year because they're going to cost $2 million a year. So sometimes Georgia's got to find a legacy with a lot of game that's not going to have the kind of sticker shock that other upper class defensive linemen are going to take, like James Johnson, for example. Some of these guys are going to cost a lot of money. So you've got to find guys that are a little bit different, that are not probably as that simply don't have the market value that others do, like the premier guys.
But I mean, what sets him apart is the amazing story that he has, especially when you tied him with his father, Anthony Lonon Sr., whose career was cut short at Georgia due to injury. Now, you've had the chance to talk to him. Do you get the sense that Dad wants him to go to Georgia?
Yeah, it's funny. Some of the stuff you guys don't, we put together some coverage and some content, but one of the things I was asking him about is I was like, man, you're saying all the right things. You're going to support Anthony wherever he goes. You guys are behind him, but I mean, this guy's friends with Bobo and Kirby, and his mother is a double dog. His mother Deborah is a double dog. That means 2 degrees at Georgia. And I was like, man, are you kind of prepared for the fact that what if he does tech? He's like, I said, this is a very natural human being question. I said, man, you got any gold or Navy in your closet? He's like, no. He's like, Georgia Tech was kind of bred to be my rival. He's like, I was like, you're going to have to rock what are you going to rock if you choose his Tech? And he's like, man, I don't know. He's like, maybe a black shirt, maybe a white polo or something like that, because, this guy is a Georgia legacy. And I really like this part of his story.
There's something that I want everyone watching to hear, and I think that you did a really good job of this too in talking to Anthony Lonon Sr. And of course, when you have a kid who's following in a similar path as you once were, yes, you want the best for him, and you want your kids to not out succeed you, but you want them to live a better life than you did. And so this is Anthony Lonon Sr. I'm wanting Anthony Lonon Jr. to have a successful career at the next level.
Because at the end of the day, if he chooses that and that's what he wants to do, I want him to be the very best that he can be at it. So, and that's always been my motto. I mean, no matter what you do, you're going to be the best at it. My daddy told me when I was in high school, being an All-American and playing basketball and football at Georgia, it was he was like, I don't care what you do, but you better work harder than everybody else, and you better dang gonna show be the best at it. And so I think he understands that motto, and so he's one of those that it doesn't matter where somebody else is at, he's always pushing himself and striving to be.
And that would be one heck of a legacy to leave for Anthony Lonon Jr. I just thought that was a really different way of looking at all this. And I'm sure he wants him to go to Georgia, but I think part of being a good parent is knowing you've done enough that wherever he ends up going, he's the kind of player that can end up being successful.
Kaylee, this is the part that got me in the feels a little bit. So, obviously I'm a parent. You're going to be a great one day down the road if that's what you have for you in store for your life. But there's this thing as parents where you want your kids to have it better than you did. That's the way I was raised. You're always like, okay, I didn't have that, so I want my kids to have that. So, there's this thing where people say that your children are not supposed to live out your dreams. But Anthony and his son, both, they kind of subscribe to the following thing is it's like, Anthony Lonon Sr. came to Georgia, played on every special team, played offense and defense, and his career was cut short by a neck injury after 2 years. I think he lettered in 1996 and 1997. And with Anthony, he says, wouldn't it be great if my son goes to college and has a richer, deeper, more amazing college career than I did. He said, now, of course, I want him to do what he wants to do, but if that's his path and he goes to Georgia and does great things, makes big plays, is an impact player, and he kind of has the college career that I didn't have, it would kind of fulfill the family's legacy at Georgia a little bit. And I mean, Kaylee, I know on this show, one of the things we try to do is we try to ask folks to subscribe. Mm-hmm. That's the type of stuff that, I'd hit the button for, and learning that type of stuff about a player right there, because it kind of gets you in the fields there a little bit.
I'm glad that you bring that up, because there is another reason that you should also subscribe and hit the button on our DawgNation YouTube page, and that's the fact that Jeff and I will be at the Anthony Lonon Jr. ceremony Saturday at 1 o'clock at Clark Central. So it's just going to be posted as a video after the decision is made. Jeff and I are going to do some analysis on it, hopefully get to hear from Anthony Lonon Jr. himself. And so to see that video, make sure you subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page. Another reason, fall camp is here, new content is here, and with that, we are going to get to hear more about the true freshmen that you and I have been talking about for the last year. So with that, as a way of previewing fall camp, we're going to do our 5 freshmen to watch, quick 5 style. I mean, I say we just go ahead and get it started with the name that has literally been on every person's lips. Yeah. It's the 5-star defensive lineman, Elijah Griffin, out of Savannah, Georgia. The hype train has been unreal for him this season. When you look at those high school stats, this is over the course of his career. 301 tackles, 96 tackles for loss, 44 sacks. I feel like there's a really good chance that they're going to find a way to get him involved at some points. But, I mean, what's realistically the best contribution he can make? Or when the season's over, what does a successful first year for Elijah Griffin look like?
Kaylee, I think he's in the 2 deep by Tennessee. I think he's in the rotation in first quarter reps by Tennessee. There's just a take here, Kaylee. Forgive me, but there's a take that's just bubbling up. Probably because, you hear things from a lot of people. You've seen Elijah Griffin a lot. I think everybody says the next Jalen Carter. That's what people have said. Well, if Jalen Carter is Superman, then I would think Elijah Griffin has those qualities, but he's got a lot of Clark Kent to him. What I mean by that is he's very consistent. He's very stable. I could never see Elijah Griffin, like getting in a fight with but that's who Jalen was. That's who he was wired. But I could never see him really jawing before the game like Jalen Carter did, I believe, before the Missouri game. But the take is this, and probably it's fueled by all those reports, including David Pollock's report that consistently this 6'5", 305-pounder has been clocking 20 miles per hour on the GPS, which is something stellar. I believe, Kaylee, I'm gonna start the clock October of 2025. And I would say within a year, October 2026, I think Elijah Griffin will be the best defensive lineman at the University of Georgia.
So all of our other picks are going to be on the other side of the ball, starting with the 5-star offensive tackle, Juan Gaston, who it's kind of hard to get stats for offensive linemen. So I thought the most important thing you could put on here, 6'7", 365 pounds. He was the number 4 offensive tackle in the class, the number 18 player overall. I mean, I think he just represents everything Kirby Smart wants in an offensive lineman. Massive size, the SEC level physicality, and a lot of long-term upside. And with Georgia's recent roster turnover changes up front, I think he's someone that can get in the mix much sooner than expected.
I think with the way we're doing this, we actually are hitting the right notes to start out, because I think there's a big gap between Griffin and Gaston and everybody else. I think Gaston, provided he stays healthy out of fall camp, he's probably going to come in as like the number 2 right guard, number 2 left guard. I think he'll start out at guard depending on the injury situation at tackle. We love this piece of video. It is viral for a lot of reasons, but right here, I think Juan, whose dad played basketball at Georgia Tech, he's probably like 6'7.5", 380 here. So if Georgia gets him out of fall camp down to 350, that's where I think 345. That's when I think he becomes a tackle type prospect. But if I think he's still around 355, 360, then maybe he's a guard. But if you look at Georgia's entire 2025 class, there's a lot of great dudes, a lot of great dogs. I think the two most likely first-round draft picks, I think it would be Juan Gaston and Elijah Griffin.
Another person you could put in that conversation is the 5-star wide receiver, Talon Taylor, who is the 5-star wide receiver that I would say Georgia fans have been impatiently waiting on.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever we get to the fall and we do our highlights for the players that are currently in the class, Talon Taylor was essentially the entire highlight reel. Yeah. Look at the stats. 2,195 total yards, averaging 16.9 yards per catch, 41 touchdowns. And here's the thing. He didn't even have a freshman season, just sophomore, junior, and senior. However, I feel like the difference between a Talon Taylor and the Elijah Griffins and the Juan Gastons is he's coming into a position room that has brought in a lot of talent from the transfer portal. It's a lot more loaded than it was last season. I mean, how can he find his way into the mix when this group is pretty stacked across the board?
Yeah, I think I think a winning freshman year for Talon would just be on the travel roster for every game. And Georgia usually brings like 8 receivers for that, and that might mean that Talon might have to play some special teams. But, something should something happen to, I don't think Talon's one of the top 4, top 5 receivers on the team, but he might be in that 5, 6, 7 range along with C.J. Wiley, another really talented freshman. But I just think Talon's going to surprise some people. And here's a good reason or two why. Kaylee, it remains to be seen if we'll see this at Georgia. But for other power programs, I'm looking at Ohio State there and Jeremiah Smith, and I'm looking at Alabama and Ryan Williams. Those guys were able to make a big splash their freshman years. And I think Talon has the type of talent to replicate that, and even at a place like Georgia where they maybe don't throw the ball as much as in Alabama or at Ohio State. I think Talon's got it underneath the hood to be very special at Georgia. So that's why I wanted to include him here.
So at this part in the season is usually when we start picking what players, like president of the fan club, do we want to be? And I could actually nominate you for one already, which is Ethan Barbour, who you've been high on this entire offseason. He's the 2-time state champion out of Milton, 3,011 yards, 42 touchdowns. But here's the thing is he's not even the highest rated tight end in this 2025 class. So why is it that you think that out of between him and Elias Williams, he can be the one that makes the difference?
Because I think Elias has going to have a great learning curve because he's really been a wide receiver and he's really was a wing T wide receiver until his senior year. Now, listen, I think Elias is another one of those kind of jaw-dropping, likely first-rounders. But the special teams aspect, and when Georgia gets into red zone, they're going to feel pretty confident putting Ethan Barbour on an SEC guy and moving them out of the way. I think he's going to make a lot of early impressions in fall camp because he's just wired differently. I remember Todd Hartley telling me at the Sugar Bowl Media Day, it was like day 2, and like he was like, son, back off. You just got here. We don't need to go over everything you need to fix and what you need to do right now to start and to play right away. But that's just the way Ethan is wired. And those folks at Milton, they've given me a great pipeline of information about Ethan. And literally, he was the ASS kicker on that team. Whatever you needed him to do. People forget he's rated as a tight end, but he played a lot at wide receiver last year for Milton. And then when he got into big games, Kaylee, he was always the guy that they kind of counted on to make the big plays early to stack leads.
So last one on the list, and unlike the guys before him, Bo Walker is not the flashy 4-star or 5-star, but I think he's got a lot of winner in his, I guess the kids call it the ice in their veins.
Yeah.
When you look over the course of his 4-year career, Bo was both a standout at Cedar Grove and Rabun Gap, where through the course of the 4 years, he rushed for over 2,200 yards, averaging 7.3 yards per carry, 33 total touchdowns. The chatter has led us to believe that Bo Walker could be quietly getting some meaningful snaps behind the scenes. I mean, why is it that you think that Bo Walker was the one to get the early season hype, and what is it that he brings to the game?
Well, Kaylee, I'll give a little bit of insight into our pre-show meeting, but that was a name that was really readily came to your mind. You might be the one wearing the crown of the queen of the Bo Walker fan club among these airwaves.
I have already claimed myself as the president of the Dalen Everett fan club. I cannot have two at once. I barely have time for one.
So Bo is, you talk about state champions. I believe he's been on 3 state title teams, and he was one of those guys. We always say that this guy was a Kirby special. Like, remember Usmani Chroma and who Georgia was chasing in that class? Well, Bo was the longtime commitment that stuck with Georgia. Yep. And he made a lot of waves, impressed a lot of folks real early at spring ball, make some impacts. And I think, give him, this is what happened. One of these things we know that always happens, Kaylee, Georgia's going to get a running back injury in fall camp. That's just what happens. Somebody's going to get dinged up. Somebody's going to have to go in the shop for a couple weeks. And I think that's where Bo Walker can really kind of make his move, especially just the thought of Bo Walker there. You see him barreling through Chase Linton right there, another All-American, top 50 prospect right there. But Bo's the type of guy that I think, imagine him hiding behind the Georgia offensive line, because he's really 5'7", 5'8", very much DeAndre Swift kind of size right there. Very durable, very tough, wants to win. I think those are the qualities that are kind of going to make him we have the lower third here that says the freshman who'll thrive. Kaylee, all we've seen Bo Walker do is thrive playing football, and I don't expect that to change.
Are you confident in saying that Bo knows?
I think Bo's going to know some third or fourth team reps kind of quickly out of the gate at Georgia, depending on injury. Right now you had to say going into fall camp, do we have a healthy Roderick Robinson? I don't know. So that might mean, Nate Frazier, Josh McCrary. And then you would say Bo Walker maybe as the most likely next guy up there with Roderick Robinson in the backfield rotation.
Did you say that you thought that Elijah Griffin, by the time Tennessee rolls around, that he'd be in the 2 deep, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, then that's perfect, because we've got our DawgNation Invasion tailgate coming up, and it's at Tennessee. It's on the river. We're going to take a big DawgNation boat and hopefully hassle some Tennessee fans. So if you want to get a glimpse of Elijah Griffin joining us on the DawgNation Invasion, would be the perfect opportunity for everyone to hang out before the game and also maybe get a chance to see Elijah Griffin. It's going to be Saturday, September 13th. The first 125 people to secure their ticket will get an exclusive DawgNation Invasion t-shirt. And to find out more or to sign up, you can make sure to go to DawgNation.com/tailgate/Tennessee. We'll be there on the boat. 2 years ago, it was, one of the coolest experiences that I've ever had with DawgNation. So make sure you join us for that.
I've got one testimonial for that.
Sure.
If anybody that considers themselves dog people, Georgia fan, if they want to go and annoy a Tennessee fan without saying a word and getting a lot of side eyes, all you have to do is be on that boat. And the T-shirt's great. The view's great. I believe SEC Network captured us on a drone the last time we were there. But look at that right there. You won't believe how many Rocky Toppers looked at us like we had just basically disgraced holy water, is what, when we were floating that DawgNation cruise up and down the banks of the Tennessee River, they would try to play their fight song and play Rocky Top at us. Some folks, Kaylee, do you remember that? They had like pressure washer water guns on their deck, and they were kind of shooting across our bow a little bit, but kind of hilarious moment, because it was almost like, this is a very Southern term. I think of my mama when I say this, but like, it was almost like the look on their face was like, these Georgia folks have the gall, that's just a great Southern word, the gall to invade our sacred river with all these red and black folks on a game day.
All right, so this is the part in the show where we do our 2026 class breakdown. Starting with the offensive side of the ball, I think the theme that we could go for this week is, with Georgia moving up in the rankings, who are some individual players from each group that could potentially move up in their own rankings as the season goes on? So who are those 2 guys for you on the offense that their rank could move up this season?
So one thing we've already seen, Kaylee, Braden Fogel got a bump. I believe he's the number 110 overall player now in the country. He got a big bump. But you also, I'm going to look at Craig Dandridge. We talk about him a lot. He's one of our favorites in the class. But Craig's a guy people are starting to figure out. I think On3 Rivals just moved him up recently to the number 10 wide receiver in the country. I could see him becoming across all services after a monster senior year. I could see him becoming like a top 100-ish guy right there as well. You want to see Georgia add another running back. There's a name we'll talk about during our top target section right there. But also, it's kind of the glaring hole there. Like, there's only really one guy in this class that you could say, that guy's going to play tackle for Georgia, and that's Ekene Egboko. I think a great senior year could push him up maybe into that top 30, top 40 range.
So moving to the defensive side of the ball, same question. Who are your two that have the opportunity to move up?
These are easy. Kamari Brooks, I think he is a top 50 player when most of the country has him as a top 120 player. He is just that good, that wired to win. All those good things in the operated system I had to say about Ethan Barbour. I think Kamari Brooks is wired very much that same way. And the other one, Kaylee, without a doubt here, although there's some really great ones, is Valden Sohn, the guy out of Sweden, Malmo, Sweden. I believe he's getting ready to come back to America now to play high school ball in Virginia. But this guy right here, that's a 5-star defensive lineman. You talk to people that know football and know ball. I don't know if Georgia has seen many defensive line prospects that move the way he does coming out of high school.
And as we learned from SEC Media Days, hey, special teams is important to the Dogs, so we can't forget the two they have on special teams. It's, of course, kicker Wade Register and the 3-star punter, Heron Zuricat. Now we'll move to our class breakdown. There it is, that big, shiny number 1 that feels like it's been a very long road to get here if you're a Georgia fan, but it's there. Even though it might not stick, it's nice to look at for the moment. Then we'll get to our top targets. Top targets recently went on a really big diet. We talked about the number 1 target, Breck Kolojay, the number 2 target, Anthony Lonon Jr. So that just leaves us with somebody who's new to the list. We haven't seen him this far. It's the 4-star running back, Amari Latimer out of Tyrone, Georgia, currently a Wisconsin commit. And let me tell you, when you sent me the email of the new top targets, I can't tell you how ecstatic I was to see a running back on that list. I have been very vocal this entire year that Georgia's got to have 2 in the class. They've missed out on some. So could this finally be the second running back in the class?
Well, it's going to take a lot, Kaylee, because
it's Wisconsin. How much can it take?
Well, his brother is at Wisconsin now. I think he's got 1 more year. But, Kaylee, here's the hard part. Georgia's going to have to come hat in hand with this guy. And that's going to be some slick recruiting. Perhaps Josh Crawford, maybe Mike Bobo, maybe even Kirby Smart have to get involved. And they're going to be like, bruh, I know. We took our own sweet time. But you're the guy we want in the class. We feel like you can be a great Bulldog. He doesn't have that game breaker, 5th gear overdrive turbo boost, but everything else in his game, the way he catches the ball, runs between the tackles, he's very much an SEC back in those rights. The one thing I see in his game, Kaylee, is that he can't get away with this in the SEC, but it looks like at the high school level, he's basically daring people to try and tackle him. Like, he's like, you don't want any of this, but like, you can try, because I want to welcome you to try. And I don't think he's going to be able to steamroll guys in the SEC. But you're right, Georgia needs a back. They got 1 back last year in the class in Bo Walker, and they decided to supplement through the transfer portal. I don't know if Georgia's long-term strategy is always 1 high school guy, and then what we miss out on, we can go replace out of the portal. But that's interesting that I guess at least the top targets grew by 1. But after this week, Kaylee,
what are we gonna do?
It's going to be a top target. We're gonna have a revamped, remixed, rehashed, recast. It'd probably be like flip targets. We'll put all kinds of flips on there. One side note, I've got to share this. This is a lady that enjoys her work. Kaylee does this thing when she's really happy. She does this like little shimmy.
My happy dance.
And I can see her when she's over her laptop putting together the graphics, and she could put the number 1 back there for Georgia. You really enjoyed your job at that time span, didn't you?
Well, look, I take a lot of pride in making the graphics for this show. It allows me to release some artistic creativity that I really don't have. But I know a lot of people have said that they don't care about Georgia having the number 1 class this year. You just care about who's in it. And I totally get that, but it's a good bragging point to have. And you go back to those misses. Georgia's missed out on so many big guys, but still somehow they find their way in that number 1 spot. And I mean, that's something to brag about with your friends at the bar or wherever you are. So even though we're not going to have probably any top targets next week, that's okay. At least we've got football back tomorrow. So make sure to check out all of our DawgNation.com, DawgNation YouTube page. We're going to have a ton of stuff up. So I think something that we can all celebrate is not just Georgia having the number 1 class, but the fact that football is back and we needed it more than ever. So with that, we will wrap up today's episode of Before the Hedges. We'll see you right back here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
I want the best in life, I never settle. I'm a bulldog, so Georgia who I'm picking.